Hi, this is Chris with Clever Unicorn Games and the Unicorn Collective, back with another one of our interviews. Today I have designer of Bosk and Sagrada, two of my favorites, Daryl Andrews. How you doing today, Daryl?
Hey, happy to be here.
Tell me, Daryl, what is it that you like to do when you're not making games? So when you're not making and not playing. So what is your spare time taken up with? I see a sports hat there, so I'm guessing,
Ooh.
is that hockey?
This is actually baseball.
Baseball.
But yeah, I'm a big sports nut. So yeah, I do appreciate watching sports. And back in the day when I was in better shape, I probably played decently, but not anything special. And yeah, so sports is a big one. Watching movies, I'm a big movie fan. Walking my dog. I have a new dog of less than a year, so I'm obsessed with my little fur baby.
Yep, I've got a 2-year-old. 2-year-old dog. Still so much energy.
Oh, really? Oh no.
Yeah. Still barks at everything. Coward. He's a pure coward. I mean, he'll bark at it, but if it turns around and looks at him, he's off. He's off and he's hiding.
Right.
But yeah, yes,
Yeah, my dog just will bark so that a dog will notice him so that he can kiss it.
yeah,
He just
that's the
wants
same.
to meet every human and every dog he just wants to socialize with.
Yep, whether they like it or not. So, what was it that first? So, what game or genre of games, or what was it that inspired you to start making games yourself?
Yeah, for me, in general, I'm a bit of a sucker for kind of like what's deemed like the classic Euros, and so especially like a Puerto Rico or games like that were really what got me hooked into games. And then probably what really made me start wanting to make games. Actually, don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called Belfort. It's
I've heard of it.
kind of an area control game. It's got some worker placement. It's got some asymmetrical abilities. Kind of like cooks down a lot of my favorite parts of games. And when I played it, I loved it. And then I found out it was actually by a local designer, Sen Fong Lim, and he co-designed it with Jay Cormier, who have made since then a lot of great games. People know him for like Junk Art or Akrotiri or a few other games like that.
And
But
also
back
for all of
then,
it, all of his Facebook groups as well. He's got quite a few Facebook groups in the community helping out with design and things, which is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, both Sen and Jay are really actively involved. I mean, they mentored me, and they continue to pay it forward in different ways. So when I first got to know that game, and then found out that the designer lived in my own city, I tried not to be a stalker, but I tracked him down and said like, "Hey, let's play some games together." And I never really thought about. I just wanted to play games, and I found out someone was local, and then as I got to play some games with him, he'd say, "Oh, well, do you want to play some prototypes?" And that just kind of like changed my thinking process about games, because up to that point, games were just an escape and a way to hang out and just a way to have fun.
No, that's great. That is that, and that's something new as well. That having, finding a mentor, even if it is standing in his garden and knocking on his window.
Right.
I'm imagining that's not how you did it, but yeah, no, finding somebody like that who's done it before and then having them help you, that's priceless. That really is, because there's so many pitfalls and things in the whole process that it's good to have somebody with that knowledge, which hopefully these videos are helping people with as well.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I mean, back then there weren't videos like this, so that you had to try to track someone down and ask them questions, because otherwise people were just trying to kind of figure it out on their own.
what would you say is your favorite game?
Whew, such a hard question, really. I mean, I am so much about like who am I with and what kind of game are we gonna play, and I want everyone at the table to have a good time. I like matchmaking, like being like, oh, you don't like games, or you think you don't like games. Let's find the right game for you. But if everyone was wired like me, I probably my first go to would be El Grande.
Oh yeah, good.
Uh, it's to me just like this pure perfect area control game, and it's got like enough interaction but enough like that, like even all the players matter, like what everyone chooses affects everything, but it's not in your face like aggressive. It's just like, to me it's just like a perfect mix.
It is. I like El Grande a lot. I like stacking the tower though. I like putting everything in the
Yeah.
tower and then just surprising people. Yeah, no, it's a good
Absolutely.
game. Very good. When coming up with a game, so when you come up with one of your ideas, where do you go to from your head? So you've got your idea in your head. Where do you go to first in creation of a new game?
Sure. I mean, it kind of each one's a little different for me. I would say that I try to come at it from different angles, and also I do a lot of code design. So when I have an idea, I usually try to think of one of my co-designers that I think this idea fits with, and then pitch it to them. And so it might just be kind of swirling around in my head, but as quickly as possible, I try to get it out of my head and either some bits or just like scribble some stuff down, see if it's even logical or I'm just not crazy and it's just perfect in my head. And then when explaining it to someone else, that also forces me to kind of think through how do I describe this idea, and like from there it might actually become kind of a really rough prototype. Like I look around in front of me and like I got all the time, sketched out little scribbles and bits and whatever, because I just want to try to get it physical as fast as possible, and then find where it breaks as quickly as possible and go, okay, now let's fix that and reiterate. And then after I've done that a bunch of times, then I'll subject someone else to it. But I've tried to like kind of almost play by myself a few times, make sure there's a fun moment, and then try to put it in front of other people. But the initial catalyst could be a mechanic, it could be a weird looking component, it could be like for Sagrada, for instance, it was based on the five color theorem. Like it kind of comes from anywhere, but then it's like, is there something to it? Is really the early prototyping question.
You've taken a few games now all the way from your head and you've taken them and got them out to the gamers. In any of those processes, can you think of one or two hurdles or barriers that you've hit and they have just stopped you dead and you've had no idea how you were going to get over them? And then how did you get over them? This is probably more
Yeah.
earlier on before you learned as much.
No, I mean it still happens. It's funny. Especially like if you start to make something and then someone goes, oh, that already exists, or something like that already exists, that becomes like a big like, uh-oh, do I just stop now? And sometimes yes, sometimes it's like, oh, let's check that out and see how it's different, and maybe even try to diverge when you hear of similarities. But yeah, no, the other thing that's a huge tip that I kind of had to learn was when I hit those walls, maybe just kind of, I use the analogy of put it on a back burner and let it simmer. And I try to work on multiple games so that when I hit those walls, I can just let it go for a bit. And there's so many times that whatever seemed like an impossible wall will actually solve itself kind of in your subconscious. Like all of a sudden in the shower, an idea will go, oh, that's not a problem. Boom, like you kind of have something. Or while it's simmering, because I co-design, the co-designer comes up with a solution to get us past that. So you're kind of bouncing off of each other. So for me, like that happens all the time, but it's just actually the perseverance of pushing through that.
Well, one thing we haven't touched on really in the show so far and all the interviews we've done is co-designing. So how do you usually go about it? I mean, is it a case of somebody comes up with an idea, then you pass it across and they work on it, and then they pass it back, or is it each one of you takes your own part of it and works with it, and then you meet up and see how it comes out?
Yeah, again, another kind of like with any relationship, you kind of have to figure out how you're going to make it work. And unfortunately, some people that I have great friendships with, I was not a good co-designer with. So there's a kind of like figuring out, does this work? Is this productive? I kind of use the analogy of like some actors have chemistry and some don't. And it's not that they're a bad actor, but just sometimes the vibe doesn't work. Same thing, like you can find people and you got to kind of just try to make a few things together, and then at the end kind of evaluate like, was that smooth or was that like really awkward or kind of difficult, because hopefully the right co-designer, you bounce off each other. It's like I've heard the analogy of like improv actors who say yes. You don't want to say no. You want to bounce off and springboard off of that thing. Same thing when you're co-designing. It's like when you hit something, you go, okay, well then what about this and what about this, and you obviously have to limit that, but you keep pushing kind of that rock up the hill a little bit. I think with co-design, that's why I love it. I also co-design differently with different people. So depending on who I'm working with, they're going to have kind of a different voice or a different style or a different strength. So someone like Adrian is very, very mechanical focused. He's a chemist who I've designed Sagrada with and a bunch of other games, and he's very much like into the rules and into the details of the math, and I appreciate that. I'm kind of wired that way too, but I kind of lay off on that as much versus when I worked, for instance, on Bosk with Erica. She's far more theme driven, and so I usually let the foot off the gas on the theme and let her really drive that and complement that as much as I can. Now we still kind of all do a bit of everything, so we're not like pigeonholed, but we still kind of fall more into a role or another. So that would be kind of during the design process. And then we kind of divvy up other roles too, like anything from I enjoy pitching games. So that's something that I really like to kind of lead on in my co-designs versus I'm not much of a prototyper. So I'll often defer to my design partner to really help cast the vision. Like I'm very opinionated, so I can say what I like, but I can't always like make it. So that's a few examples.
No, that's good. Have you ever played a game, and you don't have to name it, that you just really didn't like? And what was the mechanic of the theme, or what was it that really put you off the game?
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind saying the game because one of the things that I think is important is that not all games are for all people. And so sometimes even I'll pick on a popular game because this is a game that still brings a lot of people joy and a lot of people have a good time. And I'm not of the ilk that I think games are bad. I mean, there are some bad ones, but most of the time it's a good game. It's just maybe not my taste or not my vision or not my choices as a designer. So, for instance, I think Terraforming Mars is a super popular game. Not a lot of people say bad stuff about it. I'll be the bad guy. But for instance, I think there's an interesting thing that happens in Terraforming Mars in that usually when you're choosing what you're going to do, there's kind of a best option. And when you choose that best option, then your next option, there's a best option. And you kind of, what I would describe are a little bit on the rails. That basically you're trying to choose, now that I've made decision A and B, what's the C card? So that I can just keep maximizing this. And sometimes you don't see the exact card you want, but you kind of get stuck in a direction. I like games when they do the reverse. I like a game that I can keep making forks. I can keep making decisions, and that all those different decisions lead to a very different path or experience. Instead of kind of trying to find one and then just keep leaning, I almost say it's almost like a funnel of like you maximize this one strategy really well. And then people will play Terraforming Mars again and they'll do another one and another one specifically. So that would be for me a game that really frustrates me. And sometimes I force myself to think, okay, how do I do the opposite? Because sometimes even my own designs, I'll start going that way. I'll go, no, I don't like that. So I better not design a game that I don't like because I'm going to have to play this thing a bunch of times.
Have you played Underwater Cities?
I have. And you know what's funny? I love underwater cities.
That's sort of took over from Terraforming Mars for me. Instead of playing Terraforming Mars, I play Underwater Cities now.
Well, because that game does the opposite to some degree. I see a color and I get tempted, like, oh, I was going down this way, but all right, well, now this card would match up there. Maybe I'll go over here and change plans. And so I feel like I can keep changing my plans, yet still not feel like it's luck, not like it's just a card just told me to do it. But now I have new temptations.
Yeah, no, it's a special game, that, and the fact that it doesn't use as many cards as well. So you're only limited to a certain amount, so you don't have a wall of cards in front of you, and you have to remember what each one does. Is kind of a better way of working. But anyway, let's stop kicking Terraforming Mars.
It's doing well enough. I don't think anyone attached to that project is not sad about my comments. So.
And I know people, and and I've spoken to people on here that love it as well. Yeah, and I can understand it. I understand it that there are ways, and if you get the right synergy and the cards all work together and stuff, it's really rewarding for you to have done it. So I understand completely. But there are slightly easier to play games out there. that do the same thing, or if not, slightly different. Anyway,
Yeah.
why is it that you make games? What is it that drives you to make games?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think there's probably two main reasons. One is I really have enjoyed what games do in my life. I love that it brings people together. It gives people kind of an excuse to talk and hang out, and you can see people really discover and have fun and get stressed and all these things and kind of tackle it either cooperatively or against each other, and then you can clean up and everyone's friends again. So like I like that. I love that experience, and I love being part of doing that. And then the other part is probably I think over time I realized that my shaping, kind of like what I feel like I'm good at, dovetails well with game design. So I feel like games kind of take three parts. There's like the math, which I really love math, and just like that whole side of it. I love also like the creativity. So there's like an artistic element there. And then the other part that I really think is major in games is like psychology, just like the understanding of like how people think and what drives people and what motivates people. And so for me, like I get to dabble in all three of those, and there's not a lot of things in the world where you can do all three of those things at the same time. So that for me is kind of really fulfilling. And then also I just love what games do in the world. They bring people to a level table.
Yeah, face to face. Well, they did,
Yeah.
and they still, well,
Yeah.
they're still kind of. I mean,
Yep.
especially if you're using like I like to use when I'm using Tabletop Simulator or even Board Game Arena. Sometimes I'll make sure that we're on Discord and we've got the cameras on, so we can see each other's
Sure.
responses. 'Cause that's a big part of it is harvesting the tears of your enemies when you crush them. I mean playing and seeing people enjoy the games. That's what I mean. Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it
Well, there's some satisfaction there.
yeah, but the face to face part of it is a big part, and hopefully soon we'll all get back around the tables. Um,
Yeah,
well, that leads into how has the state of the world at present affected the way that you're designing and making games?
yeah. I'll confess, it's actually been a pretty significant one for me. I'm old school. I rarely interact with board games through a digital medium. I have a few apps. I used to try to use TTS, Tabletopia, all those things for playtesting, and for me, I didn't find them very fruitful. I think they're really helpful for a certain stage of design, especially near the end, like that kind of the polishing and balancing and getting to run a game through kind of the rules a bunch of times. But until that stage, I find it difficult, and so I actually personally I paused for a long time. I just kind of stopped doing anything that needed playtesting. Just focused on either kind of rethinking new ideas or helping polish games that were farther down the pipeline. And then just recently, I'm in Canada, and so thankfully, the Canadian context is not the same as the U.S. Or even the UK's, and we've kind of dodged a lot of it. And so, thankfully, for instance, in my city, other than certain measures, social distancing, masks, and whatnot, we have not had. For instance, we have. I don't think we've had a case in like the last month, and we haven't had any major like ICU or anything like that for a few months. So we finally just recently started playtesting again, and it feels good. It feels really good. We still limit our numbers. I have playtesting later tonight. Even we have the hand sanitizers at each of the tables. We ask people ahead of time, don't come if you have any symptoms. We limit the number so that we can kind of distance everyone. But at least for me, it's a major difference to be able to have some face-to-face interactions, because when I play test, I really like to watch like body language, and I like to see, what do people reach for and what do people, interpret the game to mean, like blind test watching and all those kind of things. And it's difficult through the digital medium.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I've got to grips with TTS and things like that now, and it's a bit easier. But you're right. First of all, yeah, for early prototyping, you can't just pick up a card and scribble something new on it. So that kind of
Yeah.
limits it early on. You can't just change a card without going and changing it on the computer and then uploading it again, by which time
Yeah.
you might have thought of something else. So yeah, I can understand that completely. You're right about it further later on when you start to get a completed game, then it's easier because you're not doing as many changes. But
Yeah.
you're the same thing happened with me when the lockdown happened. Yeah, just I give up on making games. Just put them to one side, and I started. The good thing is that I started helping other people. So I've started
Sure.
over the past few months. I've been helping with a couple of other people launching their games, which has been really rewarding. You know, seeing their games doing well, and me being able to give them the advice that one I've learned from doing things myself, but also things I've learned from these
Yep.
videos. Taking that and then helping them out with it
Sure.
is yeah, especially rewarding because they're quite one's not so new, but one's kind of a new first time designer. So that's really good. Feels
Cool.
really good. Yeah. So there's that. Although I will say now, I'm in the Isle of Man. You probably don't know where that is. It's a small island.
I know where the
You
element is.
you know
Yeah.
where the Isle of Man
Yeah.
is?
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah. Absolutely.
that's great. Usually over your side of the ocean, nobody has any idea. I don't think anybody
Fair.
from.
That's fair. I'm actually a dual citizen, so my both my folks are from Leeds.
Oh right,
So
okay.
not that not that that's close, but at least I'm not completely ignorant to that
The
side of the
UK.
pond.
Yeah, no. Well, the thing is, because we're on this small island in between the islands, and we shut down our borders, we've been COVID free for about 75 or 80 days now. So,
Awesome.
but we've kept
Yeah.
it locked down, so everything on the island's pretty much going back to normal now. I've been able to play board games and in the house and stuff with other people, so that's good. But
Right.
it's still scary seeing the rest of the world and seeing countries that are
Good.
struggling to keep it under control because people just aren't taking it seriously enough. And it's just wish they would so that we can get the world back to normal again.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
so if you can talk about it, what is it you're working on right now?
Sure. Yeah. Thankfully, actually, I just announced a few games that I've signed, and so those I can talk about right now. One, I actually pretty awesome name drop. I have a co-design with Wolfgang Kramer,
All right, wow.
and so this is my first time working with him. It was actually a project that was commissioned by another publisher. It got dropped, and I was all afraid that, oh man, I'm going to lose this chance to work with the legend, one of my heroes. And thankfully, it got picked up by Arcane Wonders, and they just announced that they're going to be making the game. There might be some theme changes and stuff like that, but it's a pickup and delivery game based off of or inspired by Wolfgang Kramer's game. I'm butchering how you say it, Auf Ausch, which was like a 1987 Spiel des Jahres winner about trucking. And so it's inspired by that. But a new design. So we're working on that with Arcane Wonders. I'm really psyched to work with them. They're really excited about it. Another one we just announced is we're doing a game with a small publisher, First Fish Games. They're Canadian from the West Coast. They did Coverdin and they did Ducks in Tow.
Oh,
and Stephanie Kwok has kind of built this really great small company that she's growing. And so her partner, Gordon Oscar, who's also a game designer, is also an incredible artist. And he has created this fictional world, a steampunk world with flying whales and like mists with like floating islands and all this cool stuff. He's been creating it for 3 years, and he showed us some of his art, and we showed them a game that we had designed originally themed around cruise ships. Cruise ships aren't so popular right now, but floating whales are cool. So we pitched like, hey, why don't we work on adapting our cruise line game to this world? So we're now in like the early stages of kind of translating the game over. I'm sure some of the mechanics will change, but at least we have a base to work from. And so we're making that. It's kind of the original game I used to say was like if Power Grid and Turn In Taxis had a baby. That's kind of the style of game that it was a bit. And so we're not sure. We might do multiple maps. That was the original goal, was that maps changing would change the game experience. Maybe it's a double-sided board or something like that. But there's that. And then a third game that I'd mentioned, we just got a contract with Elf Creek, who did Honey Buzz, and their last Kickstarter was awesome. What was it? It was like Merchants on the Road or something like that. Man,
Oh,
I'm gonna kick myself when I
I
think of
know what
what
you're
the name
talking
of
about.
it is.
I think I remember seeing it. Yeah, I
It
can't
was
remember what it's
a
called.
beautiful, really successful Kickstarter. Again, they're a newer publisher. They did Atlantis Rising, the remake, and we just signed a game to be set in the Honey Buzz world, but it's a beaver themed game.
Ah,
So we thought as Canadians we could make a beaver themed game. So it's all about uh, cutting up some resources and building dams and lodges all over the Sweetwater Grove Pond. So
oh, that
yeah,
sounds
those are
like.
kind of the three that are the announced ones that I'm heavily working on right now and really excited about.
I think in fact was it Merchant's Cove?
It was Merchants, but it wasn't Merchants Cove.
Because
I think
Merchant's
that one
Cove was a
was
big one in.
Frontiers. Final Frontiers, I think,
Ah,
is the
yeah, it was
publisher
Final
for that one.
Frontiers games. Yeah, too many
Another
Merchants games.
awesome publisher. Yeah.
So there's a tip for designers out there: no more Merchants games.
Yeah. Merchants were so 2020, 2019.
Yeah.
Now it's going to be something else.
What would you say is the main piece of advice you would give to somebody thinking of getting into this business? Somebody with an idea in their head for a game, a seed. What should they be
Yeah.
aware of?
Yeah, I think you just want to get it in front of as many people as possible. Like, lose the fear of someone's going to steal your idea. Because sure, there's a rotten egg out there, but the reality is the majority of people have a million ideas too, and they want to work on their ideas, and you want to work on your ideas. So instead, get it out there, playtest other people's stuff, get people to playtest your stuff, and like just dive in. If you can just like kind of throw yourself at the mercy of like other designers and other playtesters and see where the game will go. Just follow the fun. Don't, you're going to have to kill some darlings. You're going to have to remove some parts of your game that you liked. But if your playtesters are honest with you, they're going to help you grow that game to be fun and to, be what it needs to be. So follow the fun. Don't be afraid to cut things, and not only listen to your playtesters, but be a playtester, because that goes a long way too.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking to me today, Daryl. This has been wonderful.
Thanks for having me. This was a fun chat. I love games, and we have a great gamer community. So if there's anyone out there that wants to chat about their game, feel free to reach out to me. I love talking to people about their prototypes or playing them if it's possible. And maybe even when this world settles down and there's conventions, we can play a game together in person too.